Welcome to another Your Morning Coffee podcast special episode. This is a conversation with musician, executive, educator, and now author, Drew Thurlow.
Yeah, if you don't know Drew, he is a former professional musician turned music executive, so he's got a foot on both sides of the desk, so to speak. He's served as SVP over at Sony Music and has held executive roles at both Pandora and Warner Music. He also currently teaches music strategy and innovation at the Berklee College of Music in Boston.
I sat down with Drew to talk about his new book, Machine Music, How AI is Transforming Music's Next Act. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Drew Thurlow. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Drew, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Jay, lovely to be back here. I think this is my hat trick appearance on your podcast.
Is. Yeah.
Honored, thrilled.
I am so excited to talk to you about this book. But before we jump into that, you've got a fascinating career arc: musician, A&R, Sony, executive roles at Pandora, Warner, and now, at Berklee. Before we dive into the book, can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I can't say I've had a plan, but I started my career as a musician, and I was a session bass player. I recorded for a major label. I recorded for some indies. I still have a publishing deal with Rough Trade, although it's quite dormant these days. I haven't recorded music in a while, but I came to this because I was a player and toured and recorded. And then after being affiliated with Atlantic, I was curious about the business side. I got an assistant job at Nonesuch, the Warner imprint, and I spent 6 years there. And that was an extraordinary time. The great label, really iconic artists. I also got to work with Bjork, my all-time favorite artist. So I could have retired from there. But then I went to Pandora. Had a really extraordinary time at Pandora. In 2011, I was the first music industry person the company hired. And I think that really whetted my appetite for emerging tech in music, new economies around music, how it can be additive. And when I left the company in 2017 to go to Sony, I mean, it had been set 12 different jobs over those 6 years. It was a really exciting time to be there. So then I was senior vice president of A&R at Sony, and I left that about 3 years ago to start my own company. It coincided with having children, younger, couldn't run an A&R team anymore, and couldn't travel as much as I was. And so I started my own company, and I left Sony the month that ChatGPT entered our lives. And it's pretty clear that this was going to have a profound impact, not just large language models, but AI in general was going to have a pretty profound impact on the arts and especially music. And started thinking and writing about it, and wrote a couple of pieces for Billboard that year about maybe where AI is headed in music. Got this book deal through Routledge, a UK academic publisher. And as someone who's been thinking about this for about the last 3 years and has now written the book, there's a lot of educational opportunities open now, Joe. So I'm teaching actually 6 classes at Berklee this semester, all around entrepreneurship. I'm teaching their AI class for the business school. I'm teaching label operations. I'm teaching entrepreneurship for artists in the grad program at Power Station in Manhattan. And it's been and Berkeley's really kind of doubling down on educating their student base and student body about AI. They have a new program called Beetle. The founder of Isotope was hired to run it. We're producing a AI music conference in Boston in early June. I hope everyone submits to a speaking role or some kind of submission there. You can do it on beatl.com. And it's been really great. And I love teaching, and now I'm in book promo, and I got some other clients, and I'm advising, and now joining a music tech investment fund as a partner. So I'm kind of pretty well versed and immersed in this music tech landscape, and it's been really, really vibrant space right now.
Yeah, it sure is. But you open the book not with AI, but with the daguerreotype and this panic it caused among portrait painters in 1839. And I love that story. I love photography. It's a vivid analogy. So talk about, why did you start the book with that sort of cutting edge technology, a book about cutting edge technology with a story that's like 200 years old?
Yeah. In the research, and I think we all kind of get the sense and generally that technology often is disruptive, but it's not really what it seems after the fact, after it scales. And the more research I did, the more we've seen this movie before. Here comes a new technology. Everyone thinks it's going to be one thing. It never is that one thing. It's usually a lot more complicated, and it's usually additive. And not that the music industry hasn't had its rough patches, not that companies haven't been exploitative to artists in the past, but most technological changes have been quite good for artists and creativity and listeners and the general public. So I start the story in the book where when the camera was invented, the common sentiment was that it was going to get rid of painters. And you can draw a direct line between the invention of the camera and Impressionism and Dadaism and all the kind of schools of art that came from it. So the camera ended up being an expansion entity for visual arts. And I can't help but see that analogy in current AI and technology and music.
Yeah, people thought, with drum machines, that was the end of session drummers, or, with a lot of these technologies that disrupt. But this is a little different, because we don't know when technology or disruption, I should say, sort of rears its head. We never really know where it's going initially. We think, we do. Look at Web3 and all of, the talk about NFTs and DAOs. And we thought that was just going to completely change the landscape. But with AI, the more I learn about it, the more optimistic I am. Are you optimistic about AI as it relates to music in all aspects, whether it's helping in the studio, with mastering or noise reduction or instrumentation, or with making demos, or we could go on for hours of all the things it can do? Are you fairly optimistic about it?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I'm very bullish on this. And I think about it in kind of three buckets. Think about how AI and emerging tech is impacting the recording, compositional, and writing phase for artists. I think about how it's impacting the business, labels, release plans, live publishing. And then I think about one of the most interesting ways is how it's impacting fans, discovery, engagement, listenership. And this is a very powerful, complicated technology. And there are definitely some downsides to anytime there's a tech disruption. There's impacts on employment that we're seeing now. And that's not to say that we shouldn't manage that properly or be empathetic to that. But at most of the instances of where I see AI being applied is going to be really good and expansive for the music industry. And there's a lot of narratives out there that are just wrong about AI and wrong about generative AI. And the data doesn't support that. And I spend a lot of my time kind of combating those narratives. And I feel like that there's so much promise in this tech, and we talk about it like it's a monolith, and it requires some more nuanced discussion and conversation.
Yeah. I mean, people are inherently afraid of what they don't understand. And I love about the book is it sort of lays out a greater understanding. And we'll get into that in a second. Your first chapter is music's never-ending revolution, and chapter 3 is digital disruption in music. So you clearly want readers to understand that the music industry has been through crises before, the phonograph, radio, Napster, streaming, the drum machine. We talk about all these things. What patterns do you see repeating with AI, and what's genuinely new this time around?
Yeah, it's funny. I start the chapter 1 in the 11th century when music notation was formalized. And it's a fascinating story about what that did to the arts and music in general.
Yeah.
And when the Spanish conquistadors landed in South America in the 1500s, they brought with them sheet music, and you could hear Catholic hymns all over the world. It was music's first viral moment. And that was a technology that was new and evolved, and it goes on and on. And I think the best antidote, I don't think I even have this in my book, but one of the best antidotes I love is when the internet first launched into our lives in the early 2000s. I think the comments, one of the music executives who was bullish on the internet said, "This is great. Now we can sell CDs on the internet." Like, completely missed the point of what this really powerful technology was going to do to the music industry. And that kind of myopic thinking is where a lot of these kind of takes on AI, if generative AI can make music that sounds commercial grade, therefore it's going to replace artists, like that kind of lazy myopic thinking. But there's a lot of stories of, you're right, like that we've seen this movie before. Music's never ending revolution. It's a very intentional chapter title. And I don't even think I have this one in my book either, but it's very apt. How the American Federation of Musicians tried to ban the synthesizer in the late 90s, which is recent history in terms of the recorded music business. And now there's nothing close to controversial about using a synthesizer. And when I first started, I came up in the Pro Tools era. When I first started recording music, like, you wouldn't be caught dead using a DAW like Pro Tools. Like, you had to record to tape, especially in like the hipster Brooklyn world that I lived in. Like, oh no, you recorded to tape, and then like, all right, well, you could track to Pro Tools, but you had to dump and mix in Pro Tools. You had to dump to tape, and now that couldn't be less controversial using a Logic or Ableton or any DAW. So it's like, we've seen this movie before. It's never-ending revolution, and again, most of the outcomes have been quite positive for the industry and the artists at large.
Yeah, talk about chapter 4, AI for musical creators. I find this really interesting because there's a spectrum here. From AI as a co-writing tool. We did this AI roundtable recently. We talked about how a lot of these professional songwriters in Nashville are using it for demo creation because it's so important to have that demo right in Nashville. But talk a little bit about all these tools that help with chord progressions or lyrics. There's a spectrum. It's not just a text prompt that says create the song for me and you have a song. There are actually professionals who say, I need a string section on my demo, and they may use one of these platforms. There's this whole wide range from starting or completing a song completely with AI with a text prompt to maybe helping to master it or helping noise reduction or something like that. Talk about that spectrum.
Yeah, if you have an artist or a creator who says, I don't use AI, they are. AI has been in the recorded space for a long time. If you've used any kind of the drum pattern generators that have been standard in places like GarageBand for 10 years, or the most popular mixing software is Isotope's Ozone, and that has been used in mixing for 8 years at least, probably longer. And those are algorithms, machine learning algorithms that are applied to audio to create an outcome. So there is a spectrum. Not everything is controversial using someone else's training data, and not everything is a text prompt from nothing to a full song. So between plugins and effects loops and sample generation and stem generation and stem separation and effects, it's like there's all these ways you can apply interesting technology to the recorded process, and it's a continuation of what we've had. And when Pro Tools launched in the year 2000, I believe, like, we had a quick run from 2000 to 2005 when all of a sudden everyone was using these tools and everyone was using these digital editing suites, and This is just a continuation of what's already been the democratization of musical creation. So I think if you think about it in that lens, it makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot easier to kind of understand. Now, it's certainly powerful. This is the first time in history you've been able to take a vocal model of someone and send them a demo with their own voice on it. And so it's probably a little bit more dramatic than, oh, here's a new automated mastering tool, but it's still feels very familiar based on the rest of the digital disruptions we've had in the creation process over the last generation.
Yeah. You're teaching music strategy, innovation, other things at Berkeley. And that's a school with aspiring artists, producers, engineers. When your students ask you, should I be scared about AI? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hesitancy around this technology with a lot of students, and not just in the Berkeley program, other performance programs I'm familiar with. And I get it. If you study the cello for your childhood and then you're pursuing it in university, and all of a sudden a software platform can make a great cello sound, I get it. It seems existential. But that's where the education piece comes in, and that's where we break it down and talk about what's really happening, talk about the data behind it, and teach them to use these tools to their benefit, because they're great and they're powerful, and they will help you if you know how to use them in the right way.
Yeah, I think about it's like voodoo or witchcraft. Some of the things that have been done, whether it's Brenda Lee, having the songs sung in Spanish, or, Randy Travis, who sadly can't sing because of a stroke, having new music because the model is trained off of his body of work. To me, there's so many exciting things. One other one where you can localize. So let's say you and I record a song, and maybe we don't speak Mandarin, but we can have it localized, translated, but it's still our voice. And that's just scratching the surface. I see so many of these things coming down the pike that are super exciting. We talk about the fake Drake thing a lot, but synthetic voices and AI generated clones, they've made a lot of headlines. How do you address the question of authenticity? At what point does an AI assisted song stop being yours?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that doesn't have a clear answer. Copyright offices around the world are pretty aligned that publishing is for human creators, so you can't get publishing or copyright protection on generative AI that's fully generative AI. So just like I can make a novel on ChatGPT and I can sell that novel on Kindle Direct Publishing, I can't get copyright protection on that book. And the same thing in a music context. I can make a song on Suno and I can release it on Spotify, but I can't claim publishing. So that is very clear. It's fully generative AI. Where it's AI assisted, where there's a human in the loop, which is the term the EU AI Act has come up with to describe how humans and AI technology can coexist. When the human, it's a kind of a case by case basis on the Copyright Office's decisions. Now, I will say though, this is a line that keeps being moved, because just like the American Federation of Musicians 40 years ago said, we're going to ban the synthesizer because it's machine and it's not real, and it's doing something an artist can't do, which is play a string, saying polyphonic, like a monophonic synth, which is one note at once, is fine, but a polyphonic synth, that's not, where you can create a string section on a synth. And that we became very comfortable with that concept. And I think we're going to get much more comfortable with how these AI tools are really, really ingrained in the creative process. Now, there is something different about the voice. That is a very kind of an intimate and an innate part of humanity. And one of the things that I'm encouraged about with this technology is that the trade groups, most governments are taking this really seriously. That fake Drake song was an illegal gray area when it was released. It is no longer in a legal gray area. It is now illegal in most states in America, and we have some pending federal legislation that will make it fully illegal. So the governments are reacting and responding to this stuff as it comes up, and hopefully we lean into the Randy Travis examples more than the fraud examples of stealing someone's likeness and voice without their permission. But I agree with you, and there's a lot of interesting technologies that are using this to be applied to how fans are engaging with music. And it's a new growth area for the industry if we can embrace it.
Most of my friends disagree with me on this next topic, but I think that having the technology to take a body of work, and I'm only talking about with permission. So let's say it's John Coltrane's body of work and you have his estate and his people, publishing master, whatever, they agree to train a model on just his body of work. I would love to hear that. I
know.
Absolutely. But people say that's sacrilegious. What say you, Mr. Thurlow?
Well, yeah, I mean, believe me, the majors would love to do that. They would love to. Sony would love to train the Elvis catalog on a model and see what they got. And there's a couple of barriers to that. Number one, licensing agreements, and number two, like fan reactions. How do we feel about that? How do we think about that philosophically? And number three, like, what becomes of the output? Like, it's not real music from John Coltrane, but it kind of is. Like, we got to call it something else. There's a term creeping up in the generative music space called music designers, or AI music designers, to make a distinction between a musical creator or an artist and a designer. That feels like it's a pretty good term. It's kind of like more of a designer curator rather than a creator. So maybe these John Coltrane outputs are John Coltrane light or John Coltrane designed music. I don't know. We need language to talk about this stuff. We need to agree philosophically on what this is, and we need to see how fans are going to react to it. But I agree with you. Like, I'd be really curious to hear John Coltrane on that. And this is one of the growth areas of music. There's a lot of technologies out there that are harnessing this, and fans are paying for it. And there's a company called Hook Music, which does a similar kind of thing where you can kind of mash up with IP, and they have licensing deals with a lot of rights holders. Spotify's building this kind of tech. This is what the new Udio is. And there's no evidence that these tools are impacting the commercial music market. I mean, Sony Music just reached $3 billion in the first time in their earnings call a couple weeks ago. They had I think, double-digit quarter-over-quarter growth. I mean, there's no evidence these tools are replacing the repertoire that we know and love, but it's something else for fans to engage with. And I would love to mash up John Coltrane with whatever, just to see what it sounds like. Or I want to put my name, my daughter's name in a Taylor Swift song for her birthday as a novelty. And as long as it's licensed properly, and as long as the artist is on board, and as long as there's a walled garden structure around it, I don't see anything wrong with this. But I get it. It's weird. It's weird. Like we referenced None Such before. Like, I worked with David Byrne and None Such when I was very young, when I was younger in my career. And like, when he released music, when he made music, when he turned in his master to the label, like that stayed the way it was. Yeah. That's his vision. That's his art. Don't fuck with it. Treat it with respect. It's a museum piece. And pop music today is not quite that anymore. Yeah. And it's weird for people like that grew up in a different era.
Yeah. Kristen Robinson was on our, from Billboard, was on our podcast a couple of weeks ago. And she said something to the effect of, it used to be that when you turned in your film and masters, that was the end. Now it's almost the beginning of people who want to speed up, slow down, remix. I even think of, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Again, I'm only talking about with the rights holder's permission. It would be so cool to hear a reggae version of a song, or, a stripped down version, or a bluesy version of songs, like going beyond remixing. But again, to some that's sacrilegious because you're messing with that master that was never intended to be diced and sliced like that.
Yeah. And I have a chapter in my book about how the UGC era has an outsized but under-discussed role in how we think about music and how we think about this AI technology. I think the industry realized some time ago that there's a lot of value in relinquishing control of your IP once it's released. And that started with YouTube licensing and the YouTube UGC and Content ID and claiming music under UGC. And then it's sped up around, or turbocharged in the TikTok generation, where some of the most viral moments, some of the marketing opportunities, some of the biggest opportunities that artists had in their career was because some random fan snipped a chorus or slowed down a verse and then went crazy viral without any intention from the artist or the label. And I think the music industry, at least the pop music industry, has by and large understood that relinquishing control and letting the consumer be a little bit of a creator can have a lot of upside. The AI just takes that concept and formalizes it and makes it a lot more, turns it into a business model. And it's not for everybody. It's not for the David Byrnes of the world if they choose it. But there are a lot of musicians out there who are fluent in this kind of world and technology and will make money and have marketing opportunities because of it.
Yeah, you mentioned UGC a second ago. When I was reading the book, I jotted down this question about UGC. I wrote, for labels and distributors that are listening to us right now, how should they think about UGC in an AI context? Is there a way to harness fan creativity without cannibalizing the value of the original work?
Philosophically, that's a question each artist has to come up with, or rights holder has to decide on their own. Commercially, yes. That's exactly what I mentioned Hook and Udio are building. And there are platforms in place, there are revenue to be had, subscription revenue to be had if you decide to let your music live in one of these tools and then have a fan do something to it. Now, this brings up a lot of other questions, like it's the Udio deal and Hook are walled gardens. There's clearly going to be a fraud component to this. People are going to be able to rip it off the walled garden. And what happens if there's, Suno that makes the deal where they keep the walled garden away and it's all outputs? What do we make of these outputs? What if one of these songs goes on Spotify or YouTube? Well, YouTube, you can probably claim it, but who owns the rights then? The people who did the mashup, the company that owns the AI model, the original artist and publisher. It's just, we need frameworks to think about this stuff. We don't have them yet. And the fraud, anti-piracy, content moderation piece of this is key because, we all know streaming fraud is a problem, an increasingly bigger problem. And most streaming fraud, at least the last few years, hasn't really been AI yet, but that's going to change. So that has to be a big piece of this conversation too.
Chapter 5 focuses on user-generated content and how AI is reshaping the artist-fan relationship. Platforms like TikTok are already turning fans into co-marketers. AI seems to take that further, fans remixing, generating quote-unquote new songs. What's your thoughts on that, Drew? Is that empowerment or is that sort of an erosion of artistic control?
I don't think we're giving music fans enough credit. Like, music fans love music, and MIDI has done some really good research on this. They want to hear stems. They love that Beyonce song. They want to hear Beyonce's voice solo. They're curious about how the sausage is made. And these tools allow you to do that. And I think the more we can lean into that, the better that we'll have a way to serve more fans in more ways. I mean, I think it was a mistake for the music industry to completely outsource their monetization strategy to DSPs. The DSPs are 88% of revenue now for the recorded music industry. I don't think we should assume that's going to continue in the future. I don't think we should assume that Spotify is how a lot of music fans out there are going to interact with music, with gaming and adaptive audio technologies in that environment, or some of those co-creation environments, or these what you call co-marketing, which is an interesting term. I just think we need to lean into the expansion of what it means to be a music fan. And it's not just passively listening on Spotify.
Yeah, we thought downloads were going to be around forever. And if you look at the charts, it was the configuration that's been around the least.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I know. I mean, streaming's had a great run. Like, no one's denying that. But it's just time in the super fan companies that are cropping up by the dozens to create that direct to fan connection and try to make more money off them than just a streaming revenue are needed. And this AI tech is part of that story.
My big complaint about DSPs, look, I'm glad people are consuming music, but that disconnect of that fan connection, like owning your fans, I've always felt like, and yes, there's Coda and there's SoundCloud, and there's some people who are sort of testing the waters on allowing you as an artist connect with your fans. But I feel like that's the rising tide that would lift all boats, is really being able to communicate to your fans directly.
maybe that's a software problem, like a CRM solution. Maybe that's a more interesting way to serve them and just like recordings. The problem with the startups in this space is that, like, by definition, a super fan is a unique, bespoke thing. Like, in looking at what you have behind you, like what Johnny Cash super fans want is different than what a Beatles super fan want, different than what a Beyonce super fan wants. So by definition, you can't really scale that with tech. But there's some that have done well, and there's some that they're not even AI. You really, it's just like a new way. Fans also, we also don't give fans enough credit in the sense that they read the headlines. They know that artists complain about streaming payouts. They want to support music. I think that if Spotify went to $20 a month tomorrow, I think most people would continue to pay for it. So if Spotify is going to build in other features to justify that price, great. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for the music industry to capture that revenue, which they've, again, largely outsourced to DSPs.
I've always felt like streaming was grossly underpriced for what you get. Chapter 10, I made a little mark in your book here because there's so much in chapter 10. I encourage everybody to buy the book, read the book, but talk a little bit about that. I made a little note about, without giving away the whole ending, what do you think the music industry will look like in 10 years if we get this right? And what do you think it'll look like if we get it wrong?
There's definitely a dystopian future out there for us if we don't manage this properly. And the one thing I'm really worried about is big tech being so powerful that they basically either negate or ignore copyright laws and aren't, win the fair use battle to the point where it's really, artists don't have much of a say. And I'm not even really worried about the major labels. I'm really worried about like the big tech companies. And I'm encouraged, the people I talk to at Merlin and the majors and the PROs, and everyone kind of gets it. Everyone's paying attention. Everyone's put good people, smart people on this research. This is not file sharing where they are ignoring it and suing it to oblivion. This is not even streaming where they're somewhat hesitant and 5 years too late to launch like we were in the US. These are people who are getting it, and there's some limiting factors out there, like how artists feel about it. Universal would love to do even more deals than they've done, and they've done a lot, but they have to worry about what The Weeknd thinks about all this stuff. So they have their clients so we're a limiting factor, and we got to get fans. But what's music going to look like if we get this right? I mean, I think it's going to be a multifaceted way where music is involved in our lives. Gaming is clearly not going anywhere. In fact, it's getting bigger, and it's going to be $1 trillion industry by the 2030s at some point, according to Goldman Sachs research. Music has a very, very great opportunity to play a central role in that environment. And there's some music gaming companies out there that are also working in this space, but letting you score your own game with adaptive music technology is $1 billion proposition for the industry. Passive listening on Spotify and DSPs still should be around as a tentpole of the industry. More bespoke experiences and revenue for artists and rights holders connected directly to fans, apart from kind of the distributors in the middle, and a really vibrant, really interesting live sector, which also employs a lot of interesting tech to make each concert experience truly different. And if we get this right, then music is going to be way more varied and as a business than it is now.
I felt more optimistic after I read your book than I did before. I felt better just about life in general. Machine Music, How AI is Transforming Music's Next Act. Highly recommended. Drew, where can people find it? Where can they learn more about it?
www.machine-music.ai is the best place to get it. The book publishing industry, if you think the music industry's got challenges, the book publishing's got challenges. So technically it's out, although I'm calling my own release date as late March 26, because technically you can still get it now, but there's a official launch in late March. But if you go to that site, you can buy a copy today and you will get it soon.
Let's do this again, but congratulations. I know you put a lot into getting this thing done, and it's coming out. So congratulations. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I love talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate being a third guest for the third time on your wonderful podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.